Okay. You have a lot of tremendous candidates, and I want to thank the Clarion Chamber of Commerce for allowing me a few minutes to speak with you. I'm here obviously representing Governor Wolf, and it's an honor to do so. Governor Wolf is a lifelong business person, and it's a real breath of fresh air to have that background and experience in the governor's chair. Probably the best thing I can say, and I can say this since I am a lawyer, is he's not a lawyer. And that's unusual in the governor's chair. He has proposed a budget that I think is very, very important for all of you here in Clarion and frankly for everybody across Pennsylvania. He's proposed that budget because of his lifelong experience in business. He's seen Pennsylvania over the last 30, 40 years, and he loves Pennsylvania. He literally lives in the home that he came back to as a baby, but he's seen our beloved home underperform economically for a long time. We've had Democratic governors, we've had Republican governors, we've had Democratic legislatures and Republican legislatures, and folks try very genuinely to address our problems here in Pennsylvania with low job growth rate. But I think it's fair to say that nothing has worked as well as we would like. So the fundamental choice that the governor is putting before all of you is, do you want another budget that is pretty much a traditional budget? Or do you want a bold, transformative budget that will, in fact, allow Pennsylvania to finally start growing jobs at a much faster rate? That's the fundamental choice. And let's just remember a couple things about the last 30 years, indeed the last 4 years. In the last 4 years, we've had 5 debt downgrades of the state debt. 5 downgrades of the state debt in the last 4 years. 3 of those in the last 12 months. We've had structural deficits at the state level for at least 6 years, going back to really 2008 when the financial system collapsed following the Lehman Brothers bankruptcy, and revenues to the state collapsed because there was hell to pay on Main Street. Folks didn't have customers, businesses started laying off workers, and we were spiraling down. Ever since then, the state budget has been a bit of a mess. Very frankly, budgets presented year after year were largely smoke and mirrors. They were designed, frankly, to kick the can down the road. And so we get to this year, 6 years after the Lehman Brothers bankruptcy, and we still got a structural deficit. We have a deficit of, this year, depending on how you do the accounting, of somewhere between $1.5 billion and $2.3 billion. We think it's closer to the $2.3 billion number. And that follows every year for the last 6 years, that same kind of problem. And that's one of the reasons why the debt rating agencies are saying, you know, folks in Pennsylvania, they might think they're being responsible, but they just are not responsibly budgeting the state. So Pennsylvania has to, in fact, have an honest budget. And whatever else you think about the governor's budget, this is an honest budget. There is no one-time fixes. There's no smoke and mirrors. It balances this year, or the coming year starting July 1st, and it puts the state's structural deficit problem behind us. It will allow appropriate budgeting going forward. Now, the other thing that I think is very important, and it really does drive Governor Wolf's budget, which I will detail for you quickly in a moment, is that we truly do have a slow job growth rate. I was listening to the candidates, and there were many, I think, important stories within those statements, but one stood out to me because I hear it time and again, and it frankly is the same thing that's happened to the governor's family. The gentleman talked about his children having to leave Pennsylvania. In that case, I believe it was to Texas. In the governor's case, it's to New York and San Francisco, his 2 daughters. We're not creating enough opportunity here. And one of the reasons we're not creating enough opportunity here is the fact that we do grow jobs year after year, but it's at a very slow rate of growth. It's absolutely true. In the last 4 years, Pennsylvania grew 150,000 additional private sector jobs. Now that sounds actually pretty good, 150,000 new jobs over a 4-year period. The problem is that ranked 50th amongst the 50 states in the rate of job growth. Had we grown at the national average rate, meaning 25th, we'd have created an additional 200,000 jobs on top of the 150,000. By my math, that is 350,000 jobs. The fact that we didn't grow at the national average rate means we have 200,000 less jobs here today than we would have had we just been at 25th. Now, if that pattern had been in place just for the last 4 years, that would be a problem. But unfortunately, we all know we've been growing jobs in Pennsylvania for the last 30 years at a too low pace. If we're not 50th, we're often 45th or 38th at best, or 42nd. So the question again is, do you really want to try to change that? Or do you want another budget that sort of just keeps on going on with the same old stuff? So the governor is firmly in the camp that he ran for office in order to, in fact, put before you an honest budget and a budget that can, in fact, drive job growth to a much faster pace. So what is the governor proposing? First, he has, this is an education budget. And it's an education budget from early childhood through K through 12 up to higher ed, including, by the way, Clarion University. The governor is proposing the first increase for the PASHE system in basically 15 years. The PASHE system, which Clarion University is part of, is getting the same appropriation, same state appropriation that it got in 1997, 1998. That's a long time ago. So the governor looks at that and says, if we're not going to invest in education, there is no way that we are, in fact, in this modern world, going to have a fast job growth rate or a faster job growth rate. If we're going to grow jobs, we have to invest in education from early childhood through K through 12 and certainly into higher education. And this budget does that. The governor's budget proposes $1 billion of new investment in education. The second thing the governor's budget does is invest in economic development. Now the governor, where he's standing here, would probably tell you, and I agree with him 100% on this, that we wish the world, our economy, didn't feature states competing against each other with the taxpayer checkbook for jobs and investment. But the real world is states do exactly that. They offer all kinds of credits, loans, grants, other incentives to businesses to either come to your state or to stay in your state. Texas does it. Texas throws billions of dollars at businesses every year. South Carolina does it. Ask a European manufacturer or car maker what kind of incentive package they get from states in the South if they were to bring a facility to Tennessee or Alabama. Hundreds of millions of dollars, if not billions of dollars of incentives. Now, again, we would probably say better that we weren't all doing that, but we are. So our choice is we either compete or we don't. Our choice is we either arm up or we unilaterally disarm. And very frankly, our budgets for our Department of Community Economic Development, programs like RCAP, which I know the YMCA is trying to get a grant for, it looks like a wonderful project, have been slashed over the last 4 years. Slashed. We've essentially opted out of that competition. So don't be surprised if you attack education and if you underinvest in economic development, that you end up growing jobs at the rate of 50th, which is exactly what happened from January 2011 to December 2014. So the governor does propose a budget that includes investments in the traditional economic development programs of the state, including RCAP. So that's where the money is going in the governor's budget, education and economic development. There are over 400 line items in the state budget, and more than 2/3 are kept frozen or cut. He has prioritized very, very rigorously based on his business experience about what investments actually can increase the rate of jobs, create more jobs, and do it faster. And the conclusion is it's education and economic development. So there are a lot of folks who have very important needs that are not getting good news in this budget because, again, roughly 2/3 of the over 400 line items in the budget are frozen or cut. But as to the education and economic development, it's absolutely true that the governor is proposing major new investments in those two areas. And he's closing the $1.5 billion, $2.3 billion structural deficit. Last but not least, the governor is absolutely convinced that our tax system needs major reform in order for the state to compete. So the first thing he does is two big tax cuts. The first one is in the area of corporate taxes. We today have either the highest corporate net income tax in America or the second highest, depending on how you exactly count. He's proposing cutting the corporate net income tax in half. Initially to 5.99%, from 9.99%, and ultimately to 4.99%. So we would go from having the second highest corporate net income tax in the country to the fourth lowest. He's also proposing certain other changes to how we tax corporations, including phasing out another tax called the capital stock and franchise tax. Those changes in how we tax business is an important part of the governor's plan to speed up job growth in Pennsylvania. In addition to that, the governor firmly believes that the property tax in many communities now has become a tax that strangles investment and drives people out of communities. We have many communities, urban, suburban, and rural, who actually have high millage rates. I'm sure you're aware of some of them. So the governor has proposed a significant property tax reduction plan. And this plan is, in fact, rooted in good work on a bipartisan basis by Republicans and Democrats in the legislature. His proposal is to cut property taxes by $3.8 billion. And I just wanted to read you what that means in certain school districts. Right here in Clarion County. In the Allegheny-Clarion Valley School District, the reduction for the typical homeowner would be 76% in their school property taxes. The Clarion Area School District, 56.9% reduction for the typical homeowner. Clarion Limestone Area School District, 68%. And the North Clarion County School District, 59.7%. Reduction in the typical families or typical homeowners' school property tax. On average across the state, for a homeowner, it's 50% reduction. 50% reduction for a homeowner across the state on average. So the governor has those two big tax cuts, cut the corporate tax and cut the property tax. Now, in order to do that, he also, of course, is fixing the fiscal budget deficit, and I'm glad to say he's got an example to follow and how you can do all of that. Dave Reed, who is the majority leader of the House from Indiana County, has a bill that would, in fact, provide about $4 billion of property tax relief. And how it's paid for is by raising the PIT to 3.7%, the personal income tax to 3.7%. Dave Reed raises the sales tax to 7%. The governor actually raises the PIT to 3.7%, the same as Dave Reed to pay for the property tax, and the sales tax to 6.6%, a little less than what Majority Leader Reed has proposed. Now, when you've done that, this is what you have for the tax climate in Pennsylvania. You go from having the second highest corporate tax to the fourth lowest. 3.7% PIT is still the third lowest in the country amongst those states that have a personal income tax. There are 40-plus states that have a personal income tax, and 3.7% would be the third lowest. So we would have the fourth lowest corporate net income tax, the third lowest personal income tax, and our property taxes would be actually amongst the lower in the country after this property tax relief. There are communities that have low millage rates, but there are other communities that have high millage rates. And the governor's property tax proposal attacks particularly the high millage rate problem in many communities. So we suddenly have a very competitive tax system. And by the way, the sales tax would be right around in the middle of the pack. The governor does propose expanding the base of the sales tax, as those who want to eliminate school property taxes, House Bill 76 and Senate Bill 76 are examples, have proposed. But he continues not to tax food, clothing, and prescription drugs. And when you add all that up, our sales tax is pretty much right in the middle of the pack amongst the 50 states. So we suddenly have a budget that does major investments in education, major investments in economic development, holds everything else frozen or actually cuts it, shifts our tax system so that we have the fourth lowest C&I, the third lowest personal income tax. We, in fact, have property taxes that are no longer strangling investment in communities. That's a plan that works. That's a plan that, in fact, would allow every part of Pennsylvania to self-help. They can go out, as you're doing here, with the Y project and many of the other projects, and start generating jobs in their communities to keep our sons and daughters here and to provide more opportunity. And that's why the governor is working real hard, going across the state to deliver this message, because this is a moment of decision. We can do what we've been doing for the last 30 years, and it's been done with good intentions. Whether it's been a Republican governor or a Democratic governor, it's been done with good intentions. But it hasn't worked well enough. This is our opportunity to not only have an honest budget, but a budget that would, in fact, transform Pennsylvania and speed our job growth. Thank you very much, and I'd be glad to take any questions. Yes, ma'am.
This might be in the weeds, but my understanding is that one of the governor's proposals is to tax long-term care and personal care provided in the home. And I'm just wondering how that works when a lot of that is already paid for by government entities.
Yes, so it is an important question. It may be in the weeds, but it's certainly a good question. And the answer to the question starts with understanding that when the sales tax was put in place, it was taxing basically products. This was 50 years ago, goods. Services were a very small part of our total economy 50 years ago. Over the last 50 years, we've had a transformation in our economy. It's been painful at times. And as a result, services are now providing a much higher part of our total economy. So what a number of people, from those who have supported Senate Bill 76 and House Bill 76, have said it would be better to lower the corporate net income tax, lower property taxes, and expand the sales tax base. And so what the proposal does is apply the sales tax to certain services that up to now haven't been paying a sales tax on those services. Now, and one of them is, in fact, the long-term care. That's one of the proposals. So there are choices here. There are trade-offs here. There is no free lunch. We've got, at least Wall Street's telling us there's no free lunch because they keep on downgrading our debt because we haven't been honest with our budgeting. So I wish I could come here and say, you can lower the property tax and you can lower the corporate net income tax and you can have an honest budget and you can fix the structural deficit, and you don't have to, in fact, make some tax shifts. You can't do that.
Well, I understand that, but where I'm going with it is when the government is already paying for a lot of that care, who's going to pay the tax on it?
Well, the tax is a sales tax, so it is on those who, in fact, receive the services.
Okay.
it's just like it's expanding the sales tax base to certain products that currently are not taxed, certain ones. So, for example, when you go to a restaurant, you pay a sales tax when you leave at the cashier. So now will be certain other services that, in fact, currently don't pay sales tax on, that in fact would be subject to the 6.6% sales tax at the point of sale.
I have a question for you.
I think we have actually. I know this gentleman wants to talk.
If you bring your spending under control, you will not need to continue to raise taxes and find other forms of revenue.
Well, let's fair enough point, and I think we may have some philosophical disagreements. Certainly, over the last 4 years, that in fact was tried, and in fact there were cuts made, I think, in ways that were harmful to education and economic development. And I think you can be penny wise and pound foolish. And indeed, I personally believe, unless we in fact understand the difference between a good investment and a bad investment, and that's what Governor Wolf understands, when he went back to save his company, the first thing he did was raise the wages for the hourly workers in his business. He understood that was actually investing more money, raising the cost of his business, but it was a good investment. And he would stand here and tell you he would not have saved his company had he not done that. So there's a difference between good investments and bad investments, and that's why we've gone through the budget very, very, very carefully, line item by line item, to identify those parts of the budget where an investment will in fact return dollars to you by creating more jobs and growing our economy, versus those line items where perhaps there's a good reason to raise them, but we did not. And I'll give you one example. Public libraries. No increase for public libraries. A lot of folks think public libraries are wonderful. I like public libraries. I've used public libraries. But there's no increase in public libraries in this budget, because this budget is targeting those parts of the Pennsylvania state government that can actually deliver jobs and a better future. You can continue to not invest in Clarion University. That's what we've been doing, and the PASHE system. Again, they have the same appropriation as in 1997-98. That seems to me to be, in fact, penny wise and pound foolish. It hasn't worked, and it won't work. Let's get some. Yes, sir.
Dr. Michael Stallman, Superintendent of Clarion Area School District, and as you just noted, there is a tax reduction there, but as you also could see, Clarion Area School District got the lowest property tax reduction in that group. I want to know how I can convey to the citizens of my community that the tax increase that's proposed in the governor's budget will cost them net, after they pay their increase in taxes on sales tax and on personal income tax and get the relief in their property tax, will cost the taxpayers of my district $1.27 million more a year. And you talk about an investment in education, we will get a whopping $116,000 more for the education of our students in a school district that has been seriously underfunded for years under Holt Harness.
Yeah. All right. So let's go through the math. The typical homeowner gets a $1,000 property tax reduction, and they will pay 0.7% more on their PIT. This is the same formula that Republicans have presented, and in fact, if you have household income up to $100,000, if you do the math, you are going to come out either equal to or ahead. And we can show you the math. So just sit with me for a moment. Just say you have a $50,000 household income, and say it's all taxable to the PIT. That's a 0.7% increase. That's roughly, by my math, $350 increase. The typical family is going to be getting a $1,000 property tax relief. So, again, for families up to $100,000, they're going to come out ahead, typically. It's true, if you have a household income above $100,000, you will probably pay more on net under this plan than without it. But what you get is historic investments in education. Well, sir, I mean, would you prefer what we've seen for the last 4 or 5 years, cutting education?
For 4 or 5 years.
Well, for a long time. But now you've got a governor who's come forward with actually starting. Now, if you want to raise that PIT to 4%, we could even put more into education. There are choices here. There are choices here, sir. And I think, I would hope educators, and I'm glad to say most educators are delighted because they understand they finally got a governor who is, in fact, understanding the importance of education from early childhood through K through 12 and is proposing important investments. Now, we can continue to do what we've been doing, and we'll have the same results. We ranked 50th in job growth rate from January 2011 to December 2014. 50th. That is not a road that we ought to stay on. That's not a road that we ought to continue on down. So we're absolutely coming forward with a plan that, in fact, helps middle-class families. It helps, in terms of dollars and cents, more money in their pocket, those families who have incomes between, say, $30,000 and $100,000. They're doing much, much better under this plan. Got lots of questions, which is great. Yes, ma'am.
In addition to that, I think it's wonderful. Actually, I served on the school board for 9 years. And I am a proponent of raising the sales tax and what you're saying. But they need to take this step further. They need to look at those formulas that generated the 50% versus the 68% and who's getting what. And take it another step further. Should we not be consolidating these schools? Our area is shrinking. We need something coming from the state level to help us with that. We need to have some viable solutions along that line.
Yeah.
I think this is going in the right direction, but we're asking for a little bit more because we can't sustain it based on the deficits that we have faced as a lab.
Well, that's, I think it's a very interesting and fair comment. The governor firmly believes in local decision-making. And I think he also agrees that we've got too many units of government in some cases. There should be some consolidation. The state can help, but I know the governor doesn't believe that's something the state ought to order. Now, we live in a great state because we have local and state government as well as federal government. And this is a governor that respects local government. The county commissioners have a job to do. School board members have a job to do. And one of the crucial jobs to do is decide how you're going to organize your local government. And I'm not so sure you want Harrisburg telling school districts how to do that. So what we want to be a partner with those districts that, like you have just suggested, might want to consolidate. I think that's a case where the state should partner with the local district. And I do agree with you that some consolidation can be a very effective way to make government more efficient and reduce the tax burden while at the same time providing the necessary services that we have. That's just being smarter. And I really do agree with the point of your comment. So when we get to a place where there's a township or a school district or districts that voluntarily would like to look at either functional consolidation or in fact just merger, and they need help from the state, that's a conversation this governor wants to help. Yes, sir.
You mentioned something about what was that? There's a proposal here investing in economic development. Specifically, I believe it was that program addressed the issue that one of the reasons why that businesses that income potential has fallen in the state of Pennsylvania because of regulation for industries. Most Pennsylvania is industrial, is blue collar. Now, my question to you, as part of this economic
So let's talk about energy. This is my area of expertise. I've spent over 30 plus years working in energy. And Pennsylvania is an energy powerhouse. And the news actually on our energy production in Pennsylvania is very good. We rank second in nuclear production, second in natural gas production. I personally permitted 3,000 shale gas wells. We've gone from being 15th in natural gas production in basically 2008 to now second in the country. There's been explosive growth. The numbers are going up, not down. Yes, right now we've got low commodity prices for natural gas. We all know it's a commodity and there's cycles in this business. And I personally think the current prices are completely unsustainable. It's the equivalent of distressed pricing, and they will come back up towards $4 for 1,000 cubic feet. But let's get the facts right about what's been happening. We've been producing more and more natural gas in the country, in the state, not less and less. We also rank fourth in coal. So second in nuclear, fourth in coal production, and second in natural gas production. That's actually a very good story. And it's been particularly important in places like Clarion and others. And it's helping to contribute to the state's position. But frankly, even with that going on, this big growth in natural gas, the state as a whole has had a slow job growth rate. So as to the issues of regulation, we have a requirement that every permit applied for at DEP must be handled or approved or denied within 45 days. And in fact, 92% of the permits are so approved or denied. And looking at the 8% where that requirement is not met, in some cases it's clearly a mistake by the agency, and in some cases it's clearly a mistake by those applying for the permit. They have in fact filled out the application in a poor manner. So we can get better. We can get the 92% closer to 100%. We'll work on that. And I think everybody understands that there needs to be a balance in these matters. There needs to be a balance in these matters. You've got to make sure that, in fact, those processes are as simple as possible. But there are important public safety issues across the economy that are necessary. I frankly am glad that we have health inspectors going into restaurants. There's a place for it. I'm glad when I get on an airplane that there's a federal inspector looking at the airplane and the maintenance logs. So it's a question of finding the right balance in all of these areas. Anybody who hasn't asked a question? Yes, ma'am.
Yes, I wanted to know, assure us that we will not raise our personal income tax and sales tax unless the property tax increase goes through first.
Well, that's the proposal on the table. Now, and in fact, we have a structural deficit that we're dealing with. And so we're going to have to address that structural deficit. But the governor has proposed his plan that is to pay for the property taxes cut. So now there's going to be a need to be honest with everybody here. So, and in fact, one of the problems is that we haven't been honest with budgeting. So I'm not going to sit here today and tell you exactly what the end of the story is, but the answer is that the 3.7% and the 6.6% are about the property tax relief. It's $3.8 billion. But if you're asking me, is this a governor who signed a no tax pledge? No, this governor did not sign a no tax pledge. Well, hold on, let's get somebody else here.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, sure.
So what you're saying is there's no firing order, if you will, as to we're going to increase one and decrease the other. I think the concern she has is, are we looking at an increase in both at the same time?
No. Again, the governor's tax shift proposal is to provide $3.8 billion of property tax relief plus slashing the corporate net income tax. And in order to do that, you have to raise PIT. You get to the third lowest, and at the end of the day, the governor's plan gives Pennsylvania the fourth lowest corporate net income tax, the third lowest PIT, the property taxes that are amongst the lowest in the country at that point, and a sales tax that's right pretty much in the middle of the pack. That's the benchmarking. Now, there's going to be negotiations, and I can't stand here and tell you today what the end of the story is, but I can tell you where we start from with the governor's plan. Okay? Yes, ma'am.
In regards to the severance tax, our county already receives over $400,000 in taxes. We see that money directly. How do we know the severance tax isn't just going to get lost in Harrisburg?
So the first part of the governor's proposal is to make sure that the impact fee continues as is. And so that's the first point. Absolutely to continue Act 13 and the impact fee and the total dollars supplied at the highest level of that impact fee. That's very, very important to the governor. I think now, well, you haven't had a question. I'm trying to make sure we get people who have not had a question first before we go to seconds. Yes, sir.
If you're keeping the impact tax, then you're also going to take a severance tax? So it's like double taxation on the gas companies?
No, it's not. The impact fee would count against as part of the severance tax. So it's not double. It would be that part of it would in fact go to pay for the impact fee, and the same amount. But yes, the governor is proposing a severance tax. Well, the governor has been clear that the impact fee would be subtracted from the amount of the severance tax. Okay, so it's not impact fee plus the severance tax.
The end user will pay all these fees. The guy at the end of the line, the gas meter on his house, will pay all these bills.
In fact, the severance tax of 5%, which is exactly what West Virginia's had on the books. Well, hold on a second. The governor's proposal is exactly the same as what West Virginia's had on the books. It's less than what Governor Kasich in Ohio is proposing. And when gas is used, yes, at the end of the day, that price does flow through. Let's also remember, right now, a lot of gas is going out of state, and who's paying that? The person out of state is paying that. And by the way, we've been importing gas until recently, from Texas and other states, and we've been paying their taxes. Texas has a tax, Oklahoma has a tax, Arkansas has a tax. We're the only state that doesn't have a severance tax that is amongst the major gas producers in the country. We're not proposing to be the first state with a severance tax, we're proposing to be the last state with a severance tax, and one sized to be exactly equal to what West Virginia's had on the books now for 6 or 7 years. I think now you get your second question.
Thank you. And this is in the weeds, but I think a lot of us have probably had grandma in the nursing home at some
Sure.
point in time. So she's in the nursing home, the state medical assistance is paying
Right.
$70,000 a year to have her there, and grandma has to come up with 6.6% sales tax on that $70,000.
Whatever the bill is, delivered end bill is to the customer, it's 6.6%. In order to answer your question specifically, I would gladly sit with you, because I want to be accurate with you, okay? Gladly sit with you.
She's getting Medicaid, right?
Yes, so I don't think she's paying on the Medicaid payment. It's the bill delivered to you. So I want to sit with you, okay?
Okay.
Yeah.
In reference to your property tax proposed decrease, how would you see that affecting the county's reassessment? Currently, Clarion County is working on 1975 figures. So do you see this property tax reduction as a possible hindrance to that, or an opportunity to move forward?
What the property tax reduction works from is current property taxes. So it does not affect one way or the other, directly at least, any reassessment that the county may want to do or not want to do. So it doesn't directly affect that one way or the other. It takes the bill that customers are now getting, or homeowners are now getting, and applies the property tax cut to that bill.
So if we're going to move forward with reassessment, perhaps it would be good to do that when they're reduced.
That's a local government decision, very frankly, and that's why folks should vote in local government races and count. That's a very important decision that every local government has to make. Yes, ma'am.
Question with respect to energy. You had mentioned that coal is very important, coal production. Did you say we were
Fourth in total coal production in the country.
What the governor's position is, given the importance of coal production to Pennsylvania, with respect to all plant closures that we are seeing due to federal regulations, specifically the Mercury and Toxic Standards Act, which technical studies have shown do not produce anything but very negligible results, either on the fronts of health benefits or climate benefits. So we've got regulations that aren't doing anything, and we're shutting down plants because of it, yet we have a very important industry in our state. So what is the government's position on those regulations that are shutting down our plants and taking away our...
Well, look, in terms of federal regulations that are on the books, I can't stand here and tell you that the governor can do anything about regulations that are on the books. Now, in terms of going forward, what the governor is going to do is actually sit down with the coal industry, and we do that all the time, and make sure we understand their needs. You're right, the coal industry is important to the state, and this is a governor that actually supports all of the different energy sources in Pennsylvania. It's also true there's competition within the energy sector. And it's also true, so you're seeing gas on coal competition. You're seeing coal on gas competition. It's a complicated area, and the governor's going to be constructive in terms of a going forward basis by sitting down and engaging and talking with everybody in the industry. I've spent years and years and years in the energy industry and understand it very, very well. So this is an important part of Pennsylvania's economy. It's certainly the gas industry has had explosive growth, which is a great thing over the last 6-7 years. And the coal industry's had a tougher time. It's true. But we still produce a lot of coal in Pennsylvania, and we want to continue to have that happen here. Any other questions? Maybe we've exhausted everybody. Look, I really appreciate the opportunity to talk with you all. It's been a pleasure to be with you. I think this is, frankly, a moment for Pennsylvania to decide, do you think the last 30 years have gone well enough? Or do you want to have a plan that is actually going to fix the structural deficit, is honest, and will provide a way for growing Pennsylvania's jobs? It starts with education, it goes through economic development, and it absolutely must include getting our tax system competitive. And at the end of the day, where this plan put in place, we will have a very effective competitive tax system, because we will have the 3rd lowest personal income tax in the country, the 4th lowest corporate taxes in the country, property taxes under control, and a sales tax pretty much right in the middle. And there are important questions that we need to talk about, and I very much appreciate your questions about long-term care, and I look forward to talking with you. Thank you.